"Do you like the house I bought you?" His voice was calm, almost casual, but it hit me like a thunderclap. I froze, unsure if I'd heard him right. My mind raced, flipping through memories like pages in a book, and I realized I had no recollection of any house being bought for me. "What house?" I finally managed, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound steady. His eyes, twinkling with a mix of mischief and seriousness, met mine, and for a moment I felt both curiosity and a creeping unease. How could he ask this, and why now? I thought I knew my family, their ways, their secrets, but this was something entirely new, something I hadn't anticipated. My heartbeat quickened as I tried to reconcile the familiar man I loved with the mysterious weight behind his question. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, and I felt a mix of guilt and anticipation. Had I really missed something so significant? Or was this another test? Another subtle reminder of how little I truly understood my family's inner workings. I wanted to laugh it off, to pretend it was a joke, but a part of me, the part always attuned to the patterns and secrets my family wove around me, whispered that this was serious. Every instinct screamed that I was about to be pulled into a story I hadn't seen coming, and I couldn't look away, couldn't prepare. The house, whatever it was, became an unspoken promise, and a looming mystery that now consumed my thoughts entirely. I couldn't help but let my mind drift back to the countless little moments that had always left me feeling invisible. I remembered birthdays where my siblings' achievements were paraded, their milestones celebrated with grand parties and gushing praise, while my own accomplishments were met with polite nods, or worse, silence. I remembered the time I had spent weeks perfecting a painting for the family, only for it to be shoved into a closet because my cousin's report card had somehow overshadowed it. Even small gestures I thought mattered. Helping with chores, staying late to care for a sick relative, were often brushed aside, as if I had existed only in the background. I remembered the favoritism too clearly. My brother receiving the newest gadgets, the newest clothes, the newest everything, while I was reminded, subtly but constantly, that my tastes and desires were less important, my opinions less worthy. I remembered the dinners where laughter buzzed around the table, but my contributions were met with polite, distracted smiles, my words never quite landing. It wasn't cruelty in the overt sense, but the quiet neglect, the invisible weighting of affection, the way my presence could be overlooked without anyone ever saying a word. And yet, I had loved them fiercely, believed in them, tried to fit into a mold that was never designed for me. Those memories stung, but they also clarified something vital. The way my grandfather had asked about a house, something entirely hidden from me, now made a strange, aching kind of sense. I had always been unseen, and perhaps this was finally an acknowledgement, a moment that would shift the invisible into the undeniable. The mix of resentment, hope, and curiosity churned inside me as I replayed these fragments, realizing that everything I had accepted as normal might just have been preparation for this revelation. My grandfather had always been a man of quiet gestures, the kind whose love didn't roar but whispered in small, deliberate acts. He never shouted praise or displayed his affection publicly, but I had glimpses over the years. A carefully wrapped gift left on my desk, a note tucked into my backpack, the gentle way he listened when I thought no one was paying attention. He was generous, but not recklessly so. His kindness often came in secret, measured to avoid stirring jealousy among the rest of the family. I remembered how he would slip me extra money for school supplies when he thought no one would notice, how he sent letters of encouragement when I was struggling, or how he quietly corrected situations in my favor without making a scene. Yet, as subtle as his methods were, they often brought him into conflict with the rest of the family, who were fixated on controlling the estate, flaunting wealth, and asserting dominance over inheritance. He walked a careful line, always aware that revealing too much could spark resentment, arguments, or outright sabotage. I could see now that the house he had bought me wasn't just a gift. It was a statement, a protected token of his love, one that bypassed the suffocating influence of those who thrived on favoritism and power. The thought made my chest tighten with both gratitude and apprehension. It was a reminder that family love could be complicated, cloaked in secrecy, and sometimes fiercely contested. It also hinted at the battles I had never fully understood, the unspoken wars over loyalty and wealth, and the careful ways he had shielded me from them until the right moment. I realized that whatever was coming, it wasn't just about a house. It was a lesson in patience, strategy, and understanding the true depth of his care. I stared at him, my mind racing. "A house? You bought me a house?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, betraying the mix of confusion, excitement, and disbelief. He smiled faintly, as if he had expected this reaction, and nodded. "Yes, I thought it was time you knew." I sank into the nearest chair, my chest tightening. Part of me wanted to laugh, to shake my head and dismiss it as a prank or a misunderstanding. But another part, the part hardened by years of being overlooked, couldn't help but suspect there was more to it. A catch, a condition, something hidden behind the gesture. "Why now?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, but my words carried the weight of suspicion. Why not tell me sooner? Am I supposed to feel guilty or grateful? He only met my gaze calmly, letting silence fill the space between us, and I hated how that made me feel exposed. Memories of past disappointments flared, the times I had trusted family and been left empty-handed, dismissed or manipulated. My heart ached with the old, familiar fear that generosity often came with strings, that love in this family was never simple. I wanted to believe him, to trust that this was genuine, but my mind couldn't stop running through worst-case scenarios. Every instinct screamed caution. Could this be a setup, a way to stir jealousy, to remind me of my place? I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I wanted clarity, a sign that this was truly for me and not another lesson wrapped in mystery. The tension between hope and distrust gnawed at me, leaving me uncertain whether to embrace this moment or shield myself against it, as I had so often done in the past. Word of the house didn't stay between my grandfather and me for long. By the next day, whispers had spread through the family like wildfire, carrying every shade of judgment I had come to expect over the years. My aunt smirked when I mentioned it, her eyes glinting with barely concealed envy. "Oh, so he bought you a house?" she said, her tone dripping disbelief and mockery, as if my worthiness was a joke. My cousins rolled their eyes, exchanging hushed comments that I caught just enough of to feel small and foolish. Even my siblings, who I had once hoped might cheer me on, gave measured, polite nods, as if congratulating me would upset the fragile balance of favoritism they had long enjoyed. I felt a knot of frustration and vulnerability tighten in my chest, a familiar ache that had followed me through years of being overlooked. Their reactions made me question everything. Had my grandfather really done this out of love? Or had he unknowingly handed them ammunition to assert superiority over me once again? I realized that the house wasn't just a gift. It was a spotlight shining on family dynamics that had never been fair. The contrast between my astonishment and their skepticism, envy or dismissiveness, was sharp and painful, and I felt both isolated and strangely empowered, aware that this revelation was a test of my resilience in the face of old patterns. I couldn't stop thinking about the house. Every moment away from my grandfather, my mind wandered, replaying conversations, scanning old letters, receipts, anything that might point me in the right direction. I started quietly asking questions, casually at first, trying to gauge what the family knew without revealing too much. My aunt clammed up every time I brought it up, slipping into evasive answers that only deepened my suspicion. My siblings shrugged, pretending ignorance, though the subtle tension in their voices betrayed them. I decided to take matters into my own hands, tracing bank statements and following leads my grandfather had left scattered in plain sight. Each discovery felt like a small victory, an envelope tucked in a drawer with documents, a forgotten call to an agent, a bank memo confirming ownership. But there were setbacks too. Misleading directions, misfiled paperwork, and moments when I thought I had hit dead ends. My heart raced when I finally found the coordinates, a map, and a name I had never heard before. The adrenaline surged as realization hit me. I now had more knowledge than anyone else in the family, who assumed I was still oblivious. The power dynamics shifted in my favor, subtle but undeniable, and a quiet thrill ran through me. For the first time, I felt like I held a secret they didn't, a leverage point that could change everything. Each step forward, each tiny triumph over misinformation sharpened my resolve. I wasn't just discovering a house. I was uncovering my family's assumptions about me, and realizing how much they had underestimated my intelligence and persistence. By the end of that day, I knew the game had changed. I had insight, direction, and a plan forming in my mind, and the house was no longer just a mystery. It was a challenge, a symbol, and soon it would be my first real move in a family that had long underestimated me. I sat alone that evening, letting the events of the day wash over me, and I felt a storm inside that I couldn't control. Anger bubbled up first. Anger at myself for not noticing sooner, at my family for their dismissiveness, at the countless times I had felt invisible while others were celebrated. Disbelief followed closely, a sharp, twisting knot in my chest. How could my grandfather have kept something so significant from me all these years? I questioned whether I had misunderstood his intentions, or worse, whether I had failed him in some way that made him feel secrecy was necessary. Then came the guilt, heavy and persistent, gnawing at the edges of my relief and excitement. I realized that my mind was caught in the web of family dynamics I had long tried to escape, a cycle of FOMO and comparison that had shaped my childhood. I imagined what it would have been like had I known sooner, the missed opportunities, the envy simmering beneath polite facades. Status tension gnawed at me, the same old dichotomy of recognized versus ignored, rich versus poor in affection and acknowledgement, making me question whether this gift was as much a lesson as it was a reward. Yet through it all, a strange clarity emerged. I could see my family's patterns, the assumptions they made about me, the ways I had internalized their neglect, and for the first time, I recognized my own strength in navigating them. The mix of betrayal, guilt, and anticipation twisted together, leaving me raw, exposed, but also quietly empowered. I understood that this turmoil wasn't just emotional noise. It was the beginning of realizing my place in the family on my own terms, a prelude to the reckoning that was quietly taking shape. I knew I couldn't keep walking around in this fog of confusion and quiet resentment. I had to face them, the ones who had tried to bury the truth or brush it aside with half-truths and sly smiles. I called a family gathering, pretending it was casual, though my heart thumped with anticipation and nerves. As we sat in the living room, I let the silence stretch just long enough to make them squirm. "I know about the house," I began, my voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline. "And I know who tried to keep it from me." Eyes widened, faces flushed, and the murmurs started. My aunt's smirk faltered, my cousin stiffened, and my siblings' polite detachment gave way to awkward glances. I laid out the timeline, the subtle hints I had uncovered, the documents I had pieced together. Every omission, every act of favoritism, every dismissive word from the past was now illuminated. I spoke calmly but firmly, exposing how long they had underestimated me, how their assumptions had been wrong. I could feel the shift in the room, a subtle power reversal that thrilled and terrified me. I wasn't just revealing facts. I was reclaiming my voice, asserting authority over the narrative that had always been theirs to manipulate. Each carefully chosen word landed like a small hammer, breaking the invisible control they had exercised for years. I saw realization dawn in their eyes, the uncomfortable recognition that I had outmaneuvered their petty attempts at control. It wasn't cruel, but it was just, I held their attention, their envy, their guilt, all in the palm of my hand, feeling a clarity I had never known before. By the time I finished, I wasn't just the overlooked child anymore. I was someone who had finally claimed respect, someone whose worth couldn't be ignored or diminished, and the room hummed with a new, uneasy equilibrium that only I could dictate. After the confrontation, I turned to my grandfather, expecting a quiet nod or a gentle smile, but instead, he took a deep breath and began to explain. "I didn't tell you before," he said, his voice steady, "because I knew how others in the family would react. I wanted to protect you from jealousy, manipulation, and from being pulled into conflicts that were never yours to fight." He paused, letting the words sink in, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and awe. Every subtle act of his generosity, every secret encouragement now made sense. He continued, "I also wanted you to learn patience, to understand value beyond immediate recognition. And yes, the estate and inheritance have always been a tangled web. I couldn't let you get caught in that before you were ready." I sat there, absorbing his words, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The guilt I had carried for questioning his motives melted into empathy, understanding the careful thought behind every decision he had made. Awe replaced lingering anger. I realized how much he had shielded me from family drama, giving me the freedom to grow without interference. In that moment, I felt both small and profoundly connected, the depth of his love and foresight finally clear. It was a revelation that transformed confusion into clarity, resentment into gratitude, and fear into quiet strength. Armed with the knowledge of the house and my grandfather's careful planning, I realized it was time to step into the space I had been denied for so long. I decided not to announce my discovery in a confrontational way. Instead, I let it unfold naturally, subtly weaving the truth into family interactions. At the next gathering, I mentioned casually, almost in passing, that I had finalized some paperwork related to the house, watching as eyes widened and whispers began. The expressions of envy, the tight-lipped murmurs, and the subtle stammering from those who had tried to belittle me were intoxicating in their quiet justice. No shouting, no dramatics, just the slow, undeniable unveiling of the truth that had always been mine. Their arrogance, the assumptions that I would remain passive, crumbled piece by piece, replaced by awkward glances and unspoken acknowledgement. I felt a rush of satisfaction, not from cruelty, but from the karma of seeing fairness restored, from finally occupying a space I had been denied for years. I could sense the shift in family dynamics, the recalibration of power, and the quiet respect that followed, unspoken but deeply felt. That day, I realized revenge didn't have to be loud or flashy. It could be measured, deliberate, and profoundly satisfying, a mirror to the subtle injustices I had endured. I walked away from that gathering with a quiet triumph, knowing that the weight of fairness had been restored, and for the first time, I felt entirely in control of my own story. The day I finally stepped into the house as its rightful owner, every detail struck me with a sense of disbelief and triumph. The scent of fresh paint mixed with the lingering warmth of sunlight streaming through the windows, and I could hear the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, as if the house itself acknowledged my arrival. Each room felt alive with possibility, a canvas for the life I had fought quietly to claim. I ran my hands along the polished surfaces, imagining the memories I would create here, the independence this space would afford me. This was more than bricks and mortar. It was a statement, a tangible victory over the years of being overlooked, a symbol that I could now exist on my own terms, outside the rigid hierarchies and favoritism of my family. I paused at the front window, gazing out at the neighborhood, sensing the subtle shift in my own status and self-worth. It was a private celebration, yet it carried the weight of public vindication. The house was mine. My grandfather's wisdom had guided me here, and for the first time, I felt fully empowered to claim the life I had earned, free from the shadows of jealousy, dismissal, and old grievances. Sitting alone in the quiet of the evening, I let the day's events settle around me, and a profound sense of gratitude washed over me. My grandfather's wisdom, his patience, and the subtle ways he had guided me through years of family turmoil finally felt clear. I reflected on the lessons embedded in his secrecy, not just about patience and resilience, but about seeing beyond the noise of favoritism, envy, and judgment. The memories of past injustices still lingered, bittersweet and raw, reminding me how easily love could be entangled with neglect. Yet I recognized that those same struggles had shaped me, honed my instincts, and prepared me for this moment of empowerment. I felt a deep connection to him, to the sacrifices he had made quietly, and to the life I was now beginning to claim fully on my own. In the stillness, I realized that growth wasn't about erasing the pain, but learning to transform it into strength, insight, and appreciation. The house, the revelations, and the subtle victories became more than material. They were markers of my journey, proof that even in flawed families, love and wisdom could carve a path toward dignity, respect, and self-assurance. As the weeks passed, I settled into a rhythm that felt entirely my own, no longer defined by family expectations or their narrow judgments. I had claimed my place, earned respect in ways that didn't require confrontation, and felt a sense of empowerment that had once seemed impossible. My relationships with family shifted subtly. Acknowledgement replaced dismissal, Curiosity replaced envy, but I carried none of the bitterness I had feared. I understood now that true victory wasn't about revenge alone. It was about standing firm in my worth, making choices aligned with my values, and letting the natural course of fairness play out. I walked through the house, each room a quiet testament to patience, insight, and resilience, and felt liberated from the invisible chains of the past. The journey had been filled with tension, doubt, and moments of vulnerability, but it had delivered something far more enduring: confidence, clarity, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that justice, in its own measured way, had been served. I had emerged whole, respected, and unshaken, carrying with me the knowledge that empowerment comes not from others' approval, but from embracing one's own truth and seizing the life we are meant to lead. Months later, life in the house settled into a comforting routine, each corner a reminder of the journey it took to reach this point. I spent mornings tending the garden, afternoons lost in books, and evenings quietly enjoying the space my grandfather had secured for me, savoring the independence it represented. Family visits became measured and polite, boundaries respected without tension, and I watched as those who had once mocked or dismissed me adjusted to the new balance, their subtle envy giving way to awkward acknowledgement. Occasionally, small ironic twists reminded me of the karmic justice that had quietly unfolded. My cousins struggling to borrow a tool I had once lent freely, or my aunt's carefully curated social plans unraveling in ways that mirrored past dismissals. These moments were neither cruel nor petty. They were gentle confirmations that fairness had a rhythm of its own. I smiled, feeling gratitude for the lessons learned, the house secured, and the empowerment I now carried. Life had shifted, and for the first time, I truly felt at peace, thriving in the quiet victory that was entirely, unmistakably mine.